It feels like there is a lot of big name players involved in trade rumors right now, which could lead to a pretty crazy offseason. But before any of that craziness starts, which will likely happen after the finals and in the week or so leading up to the NHL draft, I wanted to make sure I got in at least one more episode of NHL Deal or No Deal. As always, when it comes to these videos, a huge thank you to each and every one of you who sent in a mock trade. Even if your comment isn't featured in this video, just know I read them all and I appreciate all of you guys. So with that all being said, let's go ahead and start off this episode with the first mock trade from Andrew, who says, to Toronto, Mason Marchment; to Dallas, Nick Robertson's RFA rights, a 2026 third and a 2026 fifth. Leafs get a solid middle six winger and give Robertson a much needed change of scenery. Dallas clears some much needed cap and gets another Robertson. I'd change the third to a second if that's what it takes. I think this is a really solid mock trade, especially if you're willing to make that 2026 third a second round draft pick, because at the end of the day, even though this is technically a cap dump for Dallas, Mason Marchment isn't the kind of player that I think you're going to have to attach a draft pick or prospect to just to move on from the final year of his contract. Even though he's coming off of a really underwhelming playoff run, this is still a guy who's had back-to-back 22-goal seasons. He's a big winger with a pretty strong all-around game, and I definitely think would be a huge addition to the Maple Leafs middle six. And when it comes to this trade for the Dallas Stars, obviously the biggest thing here is them clearing up some cap space, but you also get back a guy, Nick Robertson, who, like you said, could definitely benefit from a change of scenery. And even if Nick Robertson doesn't break out in Dallas and he produces at a similar rate to how he produced in Toronto this past season, at the end of the day, he's still cheap depth. And on top of that, they also get a couple of draft picks. I think this is a pretty solid mock trade for both sides, so we're going to start off this episode by saying deal. Moving on now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Draisaitl Goat, who says, to Detroit, Natchez; to the Avs, Tarasenko, Nate Danielson, and a 2025 first round pick. With the recent rumors of Natchez being unhappy with the Avs, I think he could be a good option for the Wings. He could be the perfect player to put on the second line who can drive his own line besides the top four guys. For Colorado, Tarasenko needs a change of scenery at this point and will provide some additional scoring in the lineup. They also have one of the worst prospect pools in the league, so the first round pick in Danielson could help them upgrade it. Natchez would definitely be a huge addition for the Red Wings and give them a much needed top of the lineup star forward, but making a trade like this would be a huge risk for a team like the Red Wings, considering the fact that Martin Necas is set to become an unrestricted free agent at the end of next season, and this is a guy who was reportedly not very happy in Carolina with the way he was being utilized, and now there's reports of him not being happy in Colorado. If the same thing were to happen in Detroit after Detroit gave up a first round draft pick and one of their top prospects in Nate Danielson, and Nate just ends up leaving as an unrestricted free agent, that would be an absolute disaster. So I'm going to go ahead and say no deal to this one, and I also don't really think it makes a whole lot of sense from Colorado's side either. Even if the Avalanche do look to move Natchez at some point this offseason, which I think is a real possibility, this is the same team that didn't play any games when it came to Mikko Rantanen. They weren't going to run the risk of losing him for nothing in free agency. So if they don't see a long-term fit there with Martin Necas, then I think there's a pretty good chance we see the same thing happen with him. But I don't think this kind of a return would make a whole lot of sense for a team like the Avalanche. Just from a pure value standpoint, yes, you're getting back two solid assets in Nate Danielson and a 2025 first round pick, which is 13th overall, but the Avalanche are a team who are in their cup contention window right now. In any kind of Natchez trade, I don't think they're just going to be looking for future assets in return. Now sure, you also have them getting Vladimir Tarasenko as part of this mock trade, but Tarasenko is coming off of probably the worst season of his entire career, and considering the fact that he makes $4.75 million next season, I honestly think he's somebody who's probably viewed as a negative asset league-wide. So again, I definitely am going to say no deal to this one, as I don't really think it makes a whole lot of sense for either side. Moving on now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Sabs, who says Dallas receives JJ Peterka, the 9th overall pick, a 2026 first round pick, top 5 protected, and Matthias Samuelsson. Buffalo receives Jason Robertson and Matt Dumba. I think I'm going to have to say no deal to this one right from the jump, for the sole reason that if Dallas is going to look to move Jason Robertson, and there has been reports that that is something they may look to do, it's going to be for cap reasons. Jason Robertson is a restricted free agent next summer. He's going to be looking for a massive extension, and for a team who are in the cap situation that the Stars are in right now, it's going to be very difficult for them to give Jason Robertson that kind of extension in the same summer that they're going to have to give Thomas Harley a huge extension. And when when it comes to this mock trade, Dallas really isn't gaining any cap flexibility at all. Sure, they're moving out over $11 million in cap hit between Jason Robertson and Matt Dumba, but they're taking back $4.29 million per season in Matthias Samuelsson, and he still has 4 more years left on his deal. And JJ Peterka is a restricted free agent coming off of a season in which he put up a career-high 68 points in 77 games. His extension isn't going to be cheap. Again, if Dallas is going to trade Robertson, it's going to be to gain cap flexibility, and they wouldn't really be gaining any at all by making this trade, so that's why I'm saying no deal to this one. This next mock trade comes from Eric Kyle, who says to Buffalo, Matias Maccelli, Michael Kesselring, the 4th overall pick in this year's draft, and a 2026 top 10 protected first round pick. In exchange, Utah receives JJ Peterka and Bowen Byram. This would be an absolute blockbuster of a trade, and I really like this idea, honestly. Not too long ago on the 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman said that Utah is a team that everybody's watching and people think they are going to take a big swing at something this offseason. There's been a lot of talk about them potentially trading the 4th overall draft pick, and David Pagnotta reported that if Utah is going to move that pick, they would be targeting a young top 6 forward in return, and they'd definitely be getting that here in JJ Peterka, as well as somebody in Bowen Byram who could end up being their long-term second pairing left shot defenseman behind Mikhail Sergachev. And when it comes to this trade for the Buffalo Sabres, obviously guys like Maccelli and Kesselring don't have the kind of upside that players like JJ Peterka and Bowen Byram have, but they are still 2 really solid, relatively young players, as Kesselring is 25 and Maccelli's still just 24. Obviously Maccelli is coming off of a pretty disappointing season, but he is a very talented playmaker who has already proven in the past that he can contribute in a top 6 role, and Michael Kesselring is a very steady two-way defenseman, and most importantly, he shoots right, which is a big need for the Buffalo Sabres. Those are 2 guys that are going to be able to come in and contribute right away, and both potentially be big long-term pieces for the Sabres. And then obviously the big part of this return for Buffalo would be that 4th overall selection, where Buffalo would likely end up with somebody like a James Haggins or a Porter Martone, depending on how the top 3 plays out. And then on top of that, they're also getting an additional top 10 protected first round draft pick in 2026. So although Buffalo would definitely be downgrading going from Peterka and Byram to Maccelli and Kesselring, I think that 4th overall pick and the additional first in 2026 makes up for that. I really like this mock trade for both sides, so I'm going to go ahead and say deal here. Moving on now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Carter B, who says, to Columbus, Jason Robertson, to Dallas, the 14th and 20th overall picks in this year's draft, and Yegor Chinakhov. This is definitely more along the lines of what I think a return for Jason Robertson would look like compared to the one we talked about earlier in this video, where they were getting back Matthias Samuelsson and JJ Peterka, as this mock trade gives the Stars some much needed cap flexibility, a young forward in Chinakhov, who's on a cheap deal, has a cap hit of just $2.1 million, and he's signed at that number through next season, and he's a guy who I definitely think, if he can stay healthy, has 20 to 25 goal upside. On top of that, they're also getting 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, which they could definitely use because of the Granlund and Rantanen trades. They don't have a first-round draft pick until 2027. But with that all being said, though, even though this is along the lines of what I think a return for Robertson could look like and that you're on the right track here, I don't think this would be quite enough to get Dallas to pull the trigger on a Robertson trade. This year's draft is one that is viewed as being a little bit top heavy, so how valuable really are those 14th and 20th overall picks? I feel like Dallas would probably rather first round picks in 2026 or 2027, and even though I think Chinakhov has 20 to 25 goal upside, there is a bit of risk involved there because he is somebody who has struggled to stay healthy throughout his career so far, so for those reasons, I'm going to say no deal. But again, I feel like we're kind of on the right track with this one. I just don't think the value is quite there. Moving on now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Quinn, another one involving Bowen Byram. This one has the Sharks getting Byram in exchange for Timothy Liljegren and Dallas's 2025 first round pick, which is 30th overall. And I think this is another solid one. The San Jose Sharks are a team that I'm expecting to be pretty aggressive in looking to improve their roster this offseason. You already have your franchise cornerstone in Macklin Celebrini. Will Smith is another guy who looks like a future star, and they're going to be adding another blue chip prospect with the 2nd overall draft pick, assuming they don't trade it in just a couple of weeks. And Bowen Byram definitely fits the bill as the kind of player that I think it makes sense for San Jose to go out and target, as he's still relatively young, but he can come in and make them a better team right away, as well as being a big piece of the team long term. A 1-2 punch on the left side long term of Sam Dickinson and Bowen Byram sounds pretty damn good. That all being said, though, I'm not sure if this return would be quite enough for the Buffalo Sabres, so I think I'm going to say no deal here. Liljegren did have a strong season with the Sharks. He put up pretty solid underlying numbers. numbers, playing second pairing minutes on a pretty brutal team, and he is a right shot, which again is a big area of need for the Buffalo Sabres, but he's obviously someone who doesn't have the kind of upside that Bowen Byram has, and I don't think the 30th overall pick would be quite enough to make up for the difference in value there, as again, this year's draft especially is looked at as a pretty top-heavy draft. Moving on now to the next mock trade. This one comes from Ryan, who says, to Toronto, Chris Kreider, 25% retained, a 2025 fourth. To New York, rights to Nick Robertson, and a 2025 second. Toronto gets an experienced winger who can give them experience in goal scoring. Rangers get a young scoring winger who could use a change of scenery. I actually really do like Chris Kreider as a potential target for the Maple Leafs. I think he would be a nice addition to that team's top six. Obviously, there would be a bit of risk involved as he's 34 years old and he's coming off of the worst season he's had in a very long time, but he's still a guy who should be able to score 20 goals in his sleep. He's got size, he likes to throw the body, and he's somebody who has consistently been a really solid producer in the playoffs throughout his career as well. And with the salary retention, his cap hit would come in at just $4.875 million, which is a lot easier to stomach for Chris Kreider at this point in his career than $6.5 million. And for the Rangers, I think the biggest thing when it comes to this trade is just moving on from the remaining 2 years of Chris Kreider's contract. I've even seen some people go as far as saying if the Rangers can't trade Chris Kreider, they should just buy him out. So something like this would definitely be a better outcome for the Rangers than buying out Kreider, even with the salary retention. At the very least, you're still getting back a young forward in Robertson, who, again, we've talked about it at length already in this video, could use a change of scenery as well as a second round pick. So overall, I think a pretty solid mock trade for both sides here. I'm going to go ahead and say deal. And now finally, finishing up this episode of NHL Deal or No Deal with the last mock trade from Quinn Hughes Wannabe, who says Rossi to Vancouver for 15th overall pick, Sawyer Minio and Nils Höglander. I definitely think Vancouver makes a lot of sense as a destination for Marco Rossi after trading away JT Miller, left them a little bit weaker down the middle. And especially if Pius Suter ends up leaving in free agency, they're definitely going to have to go out and add a center. A 1-2-3 punch down the middle of Pettersson, Rossi, and Hedl sounds pretty good to me on paper at least. And for Minnesota, I think this is a pretty solid return. You get that 15th overall selection, as well as a solid prospect in Sawyer Minio, who was a third-round selection by the Canucks back in 2023. And I think it's safe to say at this point that if there was a redraft of that 2023 draft, Sawyer Minio probably goes a bit higher than that. And then you're also getting back a player in Nils Höglander who can come in and contribute right away. Obviously, he had a down year with just 8 goals in 72 games, but he's only one season removed from putting up a career-high 24 goals. We know he's a player who has a ton of skill, and if he can get back to being that 20-goal guy, his contract looks pretty good. He's a cap of just $3 million per season, and he signed at that number for 3 more seasons. So another pretty solid mock trade here in my eyes. We're going to finish off this episode by saying deal. So that is going to wrap up this episode of NHL Deal or No Deal. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, huge shout out to everyone who participated and sent in a mock trade. You all make these interactive videos so much fun for me to do. If you guys enjoyed this episode and you want to see another one in the near future, then be sure to leave the video a like. It's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does actually help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.